This unassuming mineral, essential to our survival, is a mover and shaker in a class by itself. It's salt, and throughout history, those controlling it have been the masters of their domain. Two of today's superpowers, China and the United States, rank 1 and 2 in salt production, and each nation's salt heritage runs deep. China's emperors financed construction of the Great Wall with profits from their lucrative salt trade. And salt was the principal cargo on the Erie Canal as a young America pushed west. Part of salt's value lies in its versatility. It has 14,000 known uses, from softening water to killing poison ivy. We all know it adds flavor to our food. But did you know that it's a vital ingredient in glass, rubber, paint, and bug spray? Salt is the name that chemists give to a metal and non-metal compound. The most commonly known salt is sodium chloride, or NaCl, which features sodium metal and chlorine gas. Incredibly, the two elements that comprise the stable, ingestible salt we all know and love are two very reactive and sometimes dangerous substances.
What we're going to do today is a very simple but exciting demonstration of adding sodium to water. And what I've got right here are some bars of sodium metal, which we can cut. It's quite soft, actually, in its native metallic form, so I can cut it very easily with a knife. So we'll put this piece of metallic sodium into the water and watch what happens. The generation of hydrogen gas, as well as the amount of heat and energy being given off by the sodium, results in a pretty decent ignition of the hydrogen.
The experiment creates quite a light show, but it's nothing compared to what happens when you add too much sodium.
So this is a pretty big piece, so we'll see what happens. It's pretty impressive.
The other element in salt, chlorine, may not be as explosive, but it can be equally dangerous. In its natural state, chlorine is a gas and poisonous. In World War I, both sides used it as a weapon, contributing to 91,000 gas-related deaths. Although chlorine and sodium can be deadly independent of one another, together they form the benign substance that is ultimately a driving force of life. We all need salt to survive. The adult human body contains over half a pound of it, enough to fill 3 large shakers.
Our bodies are basically big electrical machines, and the salt is the electrolyte that keeps everything in balance. It keeps the electric charges going in and out of the cells. It aids in the functioning of our nerves, the brain, and almost every other system in the body.
Because salt is crucial to our very existence, nature hardwired us to crave it.
Salt is one of the basic tastes, and so humans have a preference for salt. It is an innate desire to consume salt. It also makes foods taste better. It's not just a salty taste, it's that it masks bitter taste. It enhances sweet taste, which makes the food more palatable.
Since we need salt so much, it's a good thing we can find it almost anywhere on Earth, including vast deposits in the United States. Hundreds of millions of years ago, the developing North American landmass was covered by prehistoric seas. As the seas evaporated, they left their salt behind, which was later buried beneath layers of sediment. One huge deposit stretches from Michigan through Ohio into Pennsylvania and New York. And it's what miners in Cleveland, Ohio have been busily extracting at the Cargill Salt Mine since 1962. The deposit they tap, 1,800 feet directly below Lake Erie, is just a fraction of the mother lode of salt spanning 4 states. They must drive 3.5 miles in darkness to the excavation site. The salt they mine here is part of the roughly 46 million tons of salt produced annually in the U.S., 1/5 of the world's supply. Down here, workers prep the blast site, where it remains a constant 70 degrees Fahrenheit. They remove all the loose salt and drive 6-foot bolts into the roof of the chamber to reinforce it. Then they drill holes into the wall and insert explosives. Putting them in place takes about 1 hour.
Once that's complete and the area is secure, the blast is set off.
The blast usually dislodges between 1,100 and 1,200 tons of salt, which then travels by conveyor to a series of crushers and screeners that reduces the chunks to less than ½ inch in size.
When it leaves the mill, it's essentially a finished product. It's taken to the shaft bottom where it's loaded into our production skips, hoisted to the surface at a rate of 20 tons per skip.
With 3 shifts working daily, the mine produces in excess of 13,000 tons a day and over 3 million tons each year. But the miners here aren't even close to exhausting their little corner of the underground salty stash.
We have a 9,000-acre tract under lease currently, and essentially with the multiple levels seams that we can mine, we have 150 years of reserves remaining.
Even some of history's earliest salt mines, open and accessible to this day, have a wealth of salt still available. One of the oldest, in Woliczka, Poland, dates back to the 13th century. Its caverns extend as deep as 1,100 feet. At the 300-foot level, the medieval miners left an astonishing signature from the vast deposit of salt. They sculpted this chapel, and everything here, from the chandeliers to the altar, is made of pure salt. In Silver Springs, New York, an hour south of Buffalo, Morton salt uses a different mining method. It doesn't require tons of explosives or an army of workers, but a flood of water. It's known as solution mining. A pipe extends more than 2,000 feet into a subterranean salt deposit. The pipe carries fresh water into the deposit, creating a pool of salt-intense brine. Then pumps force the brine up a second pipe to the surface. Next, the brine is treated chemically to remove impurities. The challenge now is to separate the salt from the water. They do that by boiling it.
What you're looking at right here behind me is a set of 4 pans. 4 evaporated pans where we bring the raw brine in, or the treated brine, and it boils through the pan.
The vacuum pans operate like a pressure cooker, only in reverse. The lower atmospheric pressure in the vacuum allows water to boil at a lower temperature. Water normally boils at 212 degrees Fahrenheit. But these pans can do the trick as low as 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Steam from a boiler heats the first pan, boiling the brine at 225 degrees. That steam then travels to the second pan, where the brine boils at only 180 degrees. By the fourth and final pan, the brine boils at only 105 degrees.
We're now in the lower pan room. This is where the salt water that comes off the bottom of the evaporation pan, this is called a slurry tank. And as you can see by looking at the brine coming out, it's a very milky color. And the reason it's milky is there's a lot of salt in that water. This is the slurry off the number 4 pan, which is the last of the 4 pans. The temperature has decreased so much by the time it got to this 4th pan that I can literally put my hand in here underneath the slurry and catch it. And you'll see as the water runs off, I have salt left in my hand.
After the evaporation process, the salt still contains some water. So a filter wheel dries it off. The end result is common table salt. This process can also create the purest form of salt, 99.9% sodium chloride. It's used as saline salt in emergency rooms and is part of kidney dialysis. Yet another method of producing salt taps the rich resources not beneath the ground, but but in the Earth's oceans. In Newark, California, south of San Francisco, Cargill operates a solar evaporation plant. 3 pumps send as much as 30,000 gallons per minute of seawater from San Francisco Bay to solar evaporation ponds, where the brine concentrates for 4 to 5 years. When ready, the concentrated brine travels to the facility's crystallizers, where it dries, forming crystals.
This is a fully saturated solution of brine water, meaning that this water would not hold any more salt. It's approximately 25% sodium chloride, 75% water. The color of the brine is pink because of a microorganism that is in the brine that will only live at this salinity level. The crystallizer behind me is the final step in our process of making the salt. The salt water, once it's become saturated with sodium chloride, is pumped into the crystallizer, usually in the beginning of the summer months, what we call our making season. That's when the sunshine is the hottest and there's usually the most amount of wind in the summertime. The wind stirs up the brines. As it blows, there's actually wave action. What we found is the more wind that blows, the bigger the crystals that will form.
To gather the salt crystals, Cargill relies on a 20-ton piece of equipment called a harvester.
There's actually a knife edge on the very bottom. It's 7 feet wide, and it cuts about 5 inches of the salt. This is our largest crystallizer, where we harvest over 200,000 tons of salt. And we're gonna be in this pond for about the next month harvesting salt. This salt is 99% purity, even before it's been washed. It's actually safe to eat at this point. Tastes salty.
Trucks take 30 tons of salt each to the wash plant, where it's dumped into a pit of brine water to remove any remaining impurities. The salt then goes through a screw washer to dewater the crystals. The dewatering screen drains the wash brine, and the salt is clean and ready to stack. The 600,000 tons produced here annually will be going into more than just salt shakers. Surprisingly, of all the salt produced in the U.S., only 5% is used for food. The #1 use, consuming nearly half of America's supply, just might save your life in the dead of winter. Every year in the United States, snow and ice cause 600,000 traffic accidents and 2,200 fatalities. To counter the problem, workers apply about 16 million tons of salt on winter roads, taking advantage of salt's ability to melt through ice and snow. More than half of all the salt produced in America, 9 times more than we sprinkle on our food, is used for this purpose. That includes most of the salt you see here at Cargill's salt production facility in Cleveland.
I'd say about 95% of the salt we produce is used exclusively for the de-icing market.
The salt travels straight from the mine to professional de-icers, like those here at North Country Snow and Ice Management in Glens Falls, New York. It's only the first snow of the season, but they're already hard at work. The salt doesn't attach to the ice, but instead dissolves within it. Salt molecules replace some water molecules in the ice, decreasing the number of water molecules able to bond into ice crystals. Once the ice becomes a salty solution, the newly created brine will penetrate the remaining ice down to the pavement, creating a brine sandwich with the road on bottom and the ice on top. The brine lowers the freezing point of water from 32 degrees Fahrenheit to about 2 degrees, thawing some of the ice. A plow then comes across the road, breaking up the ice so it can be removed. The most dangerous part of this job is not doing it right the first time. Any miscalculation can be the difference between life and death on the road.
If I don't do my job, someone gets hurt, I probably don't have a job anymore. And we try to make sure everyone is safe when we're dealing with ice.
But using more and more salt doesn't necessarily equal a successful de-icing mission.
The proper application rate is about 300 pounds, 250 pounds per acre. If you undersalt, the temperature at which salt works is going to increase. If you oversalt, the same thing. You are actually going to lose the effectiveness of the salt by putting too much down. So there is a sweet
spot as far as application is concerned.
Salt may be a cheap and efficient de-icing agent, but there's a downside. The salt water it leaves behind, especially on roads where salt is applied too liberally, can cause massive corrosion problems for cars. Automotive corrosion costs Americans in excess of $23 billion each year, or $115 for every motorist. And the problem doesn't stop there. The salt water can also seep into the seams of bridges and other metallic road structures, accelerating their corrosion. Cleveland's Cargill facility is doing its part to solve the problem by adding an extra chemical to the de-icing salt it produces.
It's a product we make called chloride. There is a corrosion inhibitor in it, so on a bridge deck, if it gets into the cracks, it would not deteriorate the steel or the rebar in the bridge deck as quickly.
As prized as salt is for this purpose today, 2,000 years ago it was treasured as the most vital part of the human diet. Since salt is essential to life, it became a prime mover, inextricably tied to the march of history. The military security of the Roman Empire hinged on it.
The Roman soldiers were paid in part in salt, and from which we get the name salary.
Societies that controlled salt trade routes wielded vast economic power. In the 13th century, merchants in Venice gained control of an important maritime trade route passing through the Adriatic Sea. The revenue they amassed from regulating salt traffic funded Venice's hydraulic system that prevented the city from washing away. Many of the major roads in Europe and Asia trace the same paths as the old salt trade routes. And in the Sahara Desert, merchants still transport salt mined from beneath the sands along the same route traveled by their ancestors 1,000 years ago. But the salt then came at a steeper price.
It was traded at one point ounce for ounce with gold because it was so hard to get.
At no time was salt more valued as a staple of human survival than in war. During America's Civil War, Union troops targeted salt storage and salt production facilities in the South, knowing that if they cut off the salt supply, the Confederacy would wither. But the North failed to disrupt enough of the Southern salt traffic to make a difference, and had to win victory with more conventional strategies. Companies like Morton Salt know we need salt just as much now as we did then. Some of these silos at its manufacturing facility in Silver Springs, New York, hold as much as 600 tons. The salt produced here will not only find its way to homes and restaurants, but also into processed foods as a preservative and flavoring. A whopping 77% of the sodium Americans consume comes from eating processed foods, about 15 times more than the amount we ingest by sprinkling it on our meals. This helps explain why each American consumes about 15 pounds of sodium each year, 50% more than the USDA's maximum recommendation. This excess of salt can contribute to strokes and hypertension, but on the plus side for salt, since 1924, Morton and some other salt makers have been adding a key element to help keep you healthy: iodine. We all need iodine, mostly because it helps regulate the thyroid gland, which controls how quickly the body burns energy.
Ionizing salt was the great public health achievement along with sanitizing water in the 20th century. Although we'd known for a century before that iodine was important to the function of the thyroid gland, we didn't understand that salt could so readily satisfy that need. People eat a predictable amount of salt, so you can meter the amount of iodine that they get by putting it in the salt, knowing how much salt they'll have.
We've all added a little salt to a meal for just the right flavor. But prior to refrigeration, adding salt was the best way to keep food from spoiling. Salt preserves food by absorbing the moisture bacteria need to multiply. Some historians contend that the United States owes its very existence to salt's value as a food preservative. Before the Revolution, the American colonies prospered and grew in part because salt made possible the lucrative North Atlantic cod industry. Salt preserves cod unusually well because its flesh is almost entirely devoid of fat. Fat resists salt, slowing the rate of preservation. Using salt, colonial fishermen were able to preserve and export vast amounts of cod, helping to power the economy of a young America surging toward independence. And the proven preserver still comes in handy today.
Salt is used in foods today as a preservative. Hams and foods like that that are cured in salt are done for the same reason of not only imparting flavor, but to have a preserving effect.
Still, our closest encounter with salt on a daily basis is when we reach for the shaker. And there's one restaurant where salting your food is no insult to the chef. He encourages it. Located in the Ritz-Carlton Hotel on Amelia Island, Florida, Salt incorporates salt into every aspect of the meal. From food prep, to cooking, to flavoring at the table. But when you say, pass the salt here, you better be more specific.
At any given time, we have about 40 different salts in the restaurant. They come from all around the world.
Some of the salts are made different by nature, which has added minerals to the deposits from which they're mined. Others owe their character to processes in which common salt is mixed with ingredients like clay, or undergoes treatments like wood smoking. Activated charcoal has turned this salt black, and the large pyramid-shaped crystals make for a fun crunch.
This salt is cypress flake salt. This is harvested from the Black Sea and the Mediterranean. We use this a lot of times either in salads or raw preparations because the quick pop of salt, but also the texture.
Some salts here, like this one that contains a bamboo flavor, go beyond spicing up your meal.
This is the Japanese aguni salt. It comes from a barrier island off the coast of Japan, Aguni Island. What we use this for in the restaurant is mainly with our coffee. When it's added to coffee, it actually lowers the acidity and mellows out the bitterness of coffee.
One of the salts here, created by the restaurant chefs, even adds a little flavor to the desserts.
What we have here is just a little bit of dried lavender that we're going to put into our coffee grinder. A little bit of Bolivian rose because it's very delicate salt, and lavender is a very delicate, fragrant flower. Basically, you just have a coffee grinder, your salt and your lavender in there, just keeping blending it until the lavender has been fully incorporated into the salt. And what we're left with is a fragrant Bolivian rose that we could use on sorbet, on ice cream, on dessert.
As you're smacking your lips at the sight of all the salt here, are you wondering what kind is the priciest?
The most expensive one that I have come across is a Danish Viking salt. It's about $150 a pound. We don't necessarily use it in the restaurant because of the cost of it.
The restaurant's salt philosophy runs so deep, it's literally in the very air you breathe.
Out in the front of our room, we feature a Himalayan salt piece. As the salt heats up, it actually ionizes the air, and it's supposed to make you feel happier, a little bit stress-free. But also, it's kind of the centerpiece of what we're trying to represent, you know, a journey through salt.
As much as we crave and value salt, it also makes our most abundant source of water undrinkable. But if you're willing to pay a $10 million electric bill, technology offers a solution. Oceans cover over 70% of the Earth's surface, a staggering 326 million cubic miles of water. And all of it is filled with salt. If you gathered up all that salt, it would cover the continents to a depth of 500 feet. Conceptually, that's a fitting image, because where do you think the salt in the oceans came from in the first place?
Ultimately, the salt that is in the ocean came from the land.
Salt journeyed to the oceans thanks to rain. When rain falls, the surrounding air causes it to be slightly acidic. As it strikes land, the acid in the rain then erodes and breaks down rocks. The runoff carries dissolved salts to streams and rivers, which lead to the ocean. Only fresh water in the ocean evaporates, returning to the atmosphere. Since the salt is too heavy to evaporate, it stays put. The ocean's salt content is 3.5%. But that's nothing compared to 20,000 years ago, when scientists estimate it was nearly double that. That's because a sizable portion of the Earth's fresh water was locked up in glaciers during the last ice age, and that left less water to dilute the salt entering the ocean. Today's ocean salt content is more than twice that of the fish that live there, which have a salinity of 1.5%. But the fish can drink the water and survive because their gills are able to process the water, removing some of the salt. As the evolutionary descendants of fish, we humans have a slightly lower salinity, 0.9%. So although we need and can easily ingest salt, drinking salt water is very harmful to us.
You can't drink salt water because drinking salt water would actually dehydrate you, cause kidney failure, and you would die.
You would have to drink about 1 gallon of salt water for your body to cross the fatal threshold. The only way to make ocean water safe for human consumption, short of developing gills, is a process known as desalination. Tampa, Florida is home to the largest seawater desalination plant in North America. It provides water for 2.5 million people.
The plant here is co-located with a power plant. In their process of making electricity, they take 1.4 billion gallons from Tampa Bay and use it to cool their boilers. We take 44 million gallons and make 25 million gallons of drinking water.
Before the facility takes on the task of removing the salt from the seawater, the water must travel through a series of filters to remove other impurities, leaving only the salt in the water. Now comes the most crucial step of all.
That water is now ready to go into the reverse osmosis building, which is right behind me. It is forced through these long tubes. Each one of those tubes has membranes in it.
Here, this is a cutaway of the membranes. This is actually about half of the length of a full membrane. The water's put under high pressure, about 1,000 psi, and it's pushed through this end of the membrane.
The intense pressure forces the water across the spiral membrane, which consists of multiple layers dotted with molecular-sized pores. The salt particles are too large to pass through the pores, but the pure water molecules are small enough to fit through and flow into a collector tube at the end of the membrane. The salty concentrate exits through openings on the side, and pumps move 19 million gallons of the concentrate per day back to the electric power plant to be diluted with salt water before it's returned to the bay. After the water has undergone a final round of chemical treatment, the plant has met its daily goal of producing 25 million gallons of drinkable water.
Well, here we are at the end of the desalination facility. It's hard to believe that only 1 hour ago that water entered the plant from the bay, and now I can tap it and drink it. Cheers.
But desalinated water has a downside.
One of the things about doing seawater desal is the cost. It's the operating costs here that are very expensive. We have a $17 million budget to run this plant. Almost 10 million of that is just to pay our electric bill.
To ease energy costs, the plant utilizes a reusable energy technique. After the salty concentrate exits the reverse osmosis membrane, it maintains a pressure of over 900 psi. The high pressure is used to spin a turbine, creating electricity.
We are getting an upwards of 35% energy recovery from that system.
Still, desalinated water remains the most expensive to produce. It costs the company $3.38 per 1,000 gallons, compared to its groundwater production at about $1, and its surface water at about $2. Although it may only account for 10% of Tampa's drinking water, desalinated water currently stands apart as one of the very few drought-proof sources.
I do think back to the famous John F. Kennedy quotation about if we could find a way to economically desalinate water, that it would be one of the greatest achievements of mankind. And we've done it on a scale that we haven't seen in the United States.
As of 2008, the Tampa plant is the only large-scale desalination facility in the U.S., but other coastal states are exploring the possibilities. California alone has plans for as many as 20 plants. There are times when adding salt to water can be just as beneficial as removing it. Case in point, swimming pools. The conventional method of disinfecting the water is to add chlorine. But too much chlorine in a pool will irritate your eyes and can even make you sick. In Moore Park, California, Jandy Pool Products makes a revolutionary device that makes it virtually impossible to over-chlorinate your pool. A salt chlorinator. The key to its operation? Breaking down common table salt to generate its own chlorine. Simply add 300 pounds of ordinary table salt to the pool and let it dissolve. It flows into the chlorinator, positioned between the pool's filter and outlet. Electrodes powered by low DC voltage emit an electric current that splits the salt into sodium and chlorine. Over time, the small amounts of chlorine return to the pool and kill any bacteria, algae, or viruses.
We do add about 300 pounds of salt to the average pool, but it's not enough salt to reach your taste threshold. So it tastes like ordinary water. To give you a comparison, it's only 1/3 the saltiness of your tears. And because the salinity is closer to your own tears, there's no eye irritation. And unlike old-fashioned pools, there's no chlorine smell.
But how does this system prevent you from overchlorinating? Once the chlorine has done its job, it doesn't hang around in the pool.
A saltwater pool is a model of recycling efficiency. It reuses the salt molecules over and over. The chlorine does the sanitizing, and when it's done doing the sanitizing, recombines with the sodium to become salt again.
But salt can do a lot more for you than make pool fun go more swimmingly. Would you believe this chunk of salt can be the key to electrifying your house? Just like metals, salts can melt if you get them hot enough. That makes them perfect for an industrial application known as the melanite process. It's been around since the early 20th century. Burlington Engineering in Orange, California uses the melanite process to add a layer of protection to steel parts that increases hardness and slows corrosion and wear. Melaniting takes two varieties of salt, but neither is sodium chloride. However, they are cousins of salt. They both contain sodium as the metal component, but it's bound to nitrogen in one salt and carbon in the other. During the process, nitrogen and carbon penetrate the surface of the steel parts, fusing with the steel.
We see the melanite process used in a huge variety of industries, anywhere from automotive and using it on things like crankshafts to give longer wear life on bearing surfaces and camshafts. We do aftermarket automotive work where we do all different types and sizes of flywheels that will wear longer and last longer. We see it in the oil drilling industry. We have parts that go out on oil rigs out in the middle of the ocean and out in the middle of the desert. And so they have to hold up in a very severe environment where not only wear resistance, but corrosion resistance is very important. The first step in the process is we take the parts and we put them into racks or fixtures, and then we take them and we wash them.
The parts travel to a preheat oven where they'll be heated to 800 degrees Fahrenheit. Without this step, the parts could deform in the intense heat of the salt bath.
So now the parts have finished going through the preheat process, and now that they're at 800 degrees, we're going to bring them around and immerse them into the salt bath nitriding bath.
The parts will remain in this initial bath for 90 minutes.
And so after we've gone through the first step of the SBN bath, we now come into the second step. We're diffusing nitrogen and carbon primarily into the steel, and this is where the carbon goes in. And it'll be in this bath for approximately 30 minutes.
A water quench completes the process. But some steel parts need an even smoother surface or more corrosion resistance and require a polish. For that, they get all shook up.
We'll take parts and we'll put them in a vibratory cup, which polishes the parts and moves them around. Depending on the parts that we're polishing, sometimes we'll use a media like this, which is a corncob media that's impregnated with resin.
The melanite process improves some items in surprising ways. The molten salt baths can smooth out the interior of a gun barrel, resulting in less friction for the bullets.
It has a lower drag coefficient. It gets less hot, and a gun barrel that is less hot is more accurate.
Of their products, the folks at Burlington Engineering like to say the same thing automaker Henry Ford once said about his Model T.
It's any color you want as long as it's black.
One of molten salt's properties, its ability to retain intense heat over long periods of time, might just revolutionize the world of renewable energy. An innovative system using molten salt as an energy storage device called ɛklɔːraɪd is now under construction in Spain. It's based on the success of an earlier prototype, ɛSoʊdiəm, which operated in California's Mojave Desert between 1995 and 1999. While sodium chloride becomes molten at 1474 degrees Fahrenheit and could easily do the job, engineers incorporated other salts into ɛSoʊdiɛm's operations because they melt at a much lower temperature. A 300-foot hollow tower was encircled by more than 1,900 mirrors called heliostats. The heliostats track the sun, reflecting its energy to a receiver mounted on the tower. The receiver transmitted intense heat inside the tower to salt composed of sodium nitrate and potassium nitrate. At over 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, the salt became molten and flowed to a storage tank. To produce energy, pumps conveyed the salt through a steam generator consisting of a water tank and piping similar to a radiator. The steam then spun turbines, generating electrical energy. The system could produce up to 10 megawatts, enough to power 10,000 homes, using mineral salts no different than common garden fertilizer. The salts allowed for energy to remain stored when clouds covered the sun, or at night. Once operational, ɛklɔːraɪd will produce 17 megawatts. As the world continues to go green, salt promises to spice things up. Molten salts can hold energy. But if you're looking to use some energy of your own, at record-breaking speeds, nothing beats an open salt flat. You may think the ocean is salty at 3.5% salinity. But that's nothing compared to the Great Salt Lake in Utah. The southern half of the lake is 15%, and the north is 25%, 7 times saltier than the ocean. The Great Salt Lake is the largest inland body of salt water in the Western Hemisphere. A railroad causeway bisects the lake, preventing fresh water from entering the north side. Through openings in the causeway, only concentrated salt water from the southern half can enter the northern half of the lake. The difference in salinity gives each half of the lake unique properties, including different colors and even different life forms.
In the south half of the lake, you get a blue-green color to it. That's usually due to the blue-green algae. When you get over the north half of the lake, it will be an absolutely a pink or a red color, and that is due to the halophilic bacteria.
The lake's high salinity makes life for fish impossible. But for more than a century, that hasn't prevented the tourist industry from taking advantage of the area.
For years and years, this was a favorite place for resorts.
The most famous of the lake's resorts, Salt Air, opened in 1893. Now a museum, it was once billed as a Coney Island of the West. It peaked in the 1920s and closed in the 50s. While the resorts had their amusements, the real fun was in the lake itself. Swimmers discovered that the rich salt content made them so buoyant, it was impossible to sink. The Great Salt Lake is all that remains of Lake Bonneville, a vast freshwater lake that existed some 30,000 years ago. It covered 20,000 square miles, stretching from Nevada to Idaho. And 100 miles from Salt Lake, where its waters once rippled, is now the sterile emptiness of the Bonneville Salt Flats.
When it went away over the course of thousands of years, what was left behind were the salts that had been dissolved in the water. It's become kind of a focal point for a lot of folks as they think about the United States from throughout the world. They want to see the salt flats.
Though a tourist attraction, the desolate 160 square miles of the flats pose a danger. Without adequate water, food, and equipment, anyone getting stuck out here would never survive. The land is so smooth and flat, you can see the curvature of the earth. But instead of danger, some see the vast open flats and think one thing: speed. You might think the salt creates great traction, but the opposite is true. Salt decreases traction by 12 to 15%, making driving on it a bit similar to driving on snow or ice. But unlike normal roads and highways, you won't find any potholes here. If any holes do occur, the solution is simple. Just pack in more salt. People come from all over for the World of Speed Week, held every September. It's a time when everyday drivers and motorcyclists get to open up their engines to see just how fast they can go.
Well, the first year we came out in 2001, we went like 196. And then it took 4 more years to get the last 4 miles an hour. And once you go 200 out here, then you want to go a little faster.
We started out here about 2003. We've been out here every year since then, so 2 or 3 times a year. We've had the car up to 220.
The Salt Flats have long been a destination for speed record setters. John Cobb set the first of many land speed records at the Flats in 1935. A blistering 368 miles per hour. Since then, many drivers have made the pilgrimage to the Salt Flats with the intent of setting new records. The drivers we caught up with weren't all expecting to set records, or for their cars to win any beauty contests.
Here's the way I feel about it. I only care about how fast it goes, not how pretty it looks. The course has a little ruts in it. The car likes to drift a little on the course, and it really makes you feel better if it will go where you point it.
Still, they're quite happy to take advantage of yet another surprising dimension of salt.
The salt is an incredibly abundant resource, but it's not endless. And we have to manage this in such a manner that future generations can come out here and marvel at the same thing that you're marveling at today.
The salt abundance of these flats belies its scarcity throughout most of human history. So the next time you're asked, don't just pass the salt. Pause and be thankful your salary isn't just the contents of the shaker in your hand.